So we're going to run through um, an overview of our testing program to date and our findings with Kit, who is our water technician. And he'll then pass over to Rob, who's one of our directors and our data lead, who's going to talk about um, what happens next in phase three. And then there'll be a chance for questions. So um, over to you, Kit.
Hi everyone, as Anna sort of already said, I'm the water technician at Friends of the Dart, and I've been the one running around for the last 6 months collecting samples in a variety of different weather conditions. Um, Next slide, please, Nick. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the water testing and the work that we've been up to. So our main water testing has been focusing on um, bathing water testing. And what that means we've done is we've mirrored the Environment Agency's approach to monitoring bathing waters. And this is the same as happens in the EU as well. So we've been taking samples, and these have been analysed for levels of E. coli and enterococci. The reason why samples are analysed for these two species of bacteria is they indicate fecal pollution within water. So that's sort of what the samples we've been taking, and yeah, and then so these samples, once we've taken them, have been sent off to get analysed in an accredited lab. And the reason why we wanted to ensure that it was at an accredited lab is the lab's workings have been reviewed and by an external adjudicator who can then, so we can be confident in our results that the data we've got is accurate and precise. And the reason why that's important is, especially starting out as a small community organisation, we want our data to be able to be viewed on the same level as established organisations such as the Environment Agency that have been doing this for a very, very long time. So by sending our samples to an accredited lab, our samples are analysed for bacteria in the same methods, using the same methods that are used by the Environment Agency. And then, so the reason why we've been doing all of this testing is to inform everyone who uses the river on water quality. Because prior to campaigning for bathing waters in the Dart, there was almost no data, and certainly no publicly available data on bathing water quality within the river. And then the second reason why we've been doing this is because we want to inform people on year-round bathing water quality. Because for those of you who don't know, bathing water monitoring by the Environment Agency only happens between May to September, but there's people using the river all year round, and especially with things like wetsuits and dry suits coming on so much, it's becoming more and more accessible for people to use the river year round. So this is one of the key things that we wanted to achieve, was transparent data on water quality of year round. And then from this, we've then been using our data to evidence pollution so that we can campaign for infrastructure improvements and work with stakeholders to improve the overall water quality within the Dart. So that's kind of the main sort of week in, week out testing that we've been doing. Next slide. So alongside this sort of core work we've been doing, we've had additional investigations. So over the summer, we had a team of citizen scientists going out every day and taking samples. And this was a project organised by Surfers Against Sewage, Watershed Investigations, and the University of York. And it was looking at pollutants in addition to bacteria, because currently all that's required to be monitored in bathing water is bacteria. So alongside bacteria, these samples were analysed for nutrients, so they're your nitrates and your phosphates, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, PFAs, which are forever chemicals. So once they're released out into the environment. They don't naturally break down. They just stay there. And then they were also looking for antimicrobial resistance genes within the water. And then finally, so Southwest Water, we were aware had a large amount of data, partly in preparation for what they were going to have to do to respond to the bathing water designations on the Dart. But that data was theirs. It wasn't really shared. So we logged a Freedom of Information request for all of their water quality data. And what we got from that was not only bacterial samples, but we also got microbial source tracking, which uses specific markers within samples to indicate what the source of the bacteria was. So that could be humans, that could be cattle, that could be pigs. So it starts to allow you to proportionally attribute the amount of bacteria coming from different sources. And then the final data we got from them was their continuous monitoring data with the sondes that they have installed. And these have a lot of parameters, including dissolved oxygen, turbidity, ammonia. So yeah, next slide. So back to the core sampling. What we've been doing over the last 6 months or so is monitoring at 7 sites. So 4 of these sites are the bathing water sites, and these are Steamer Key, Stoke Gabriel, Diddersham, and Warfleet Creek. So during the bathing season, the Environment Agency have been taking weekly samples there. However, once the bathing season finished, we stepped in and started taking weekly samples there so that we could share the data of what water quality is like year round. In addition to the bathing sites, we have the community designated sites. And these sites we monitor because they're really highly used. So at Dartington Pontoon, Dartington Beach, and Holme Weir, these are actually some of the busiest sites in terms of river use on the Dart. However, they wouldn't be able to get awarded bathing water status due to the criteria that's needed to meet bathing water status, because you need facilities such as parking and toilets, and these sites don't have any of that. Next slide. So from this, we've collected a lot of data and we've learned quite a lot. And I think it's one thing that's really important to remember is the water quality data that we've collected and our findings. As far as we know, this is how things have been in the Dart for a very long time. And actually, what we've done is just shine a light on how water quality is in the Dart. It might seem a little bit daunting, but it's not changed any time in recent time. It's always been like this as far as we know. So we've got a lot of patterns of pollution. These are both not only spatial, with some sites being more polluted than others. There's also seasonal patterns of pollution, and also patterns of pollution in response to weather conditions. So this is not only rainfall, but also really dry points when the river levels are much lower. And then we've also, from this, started to look at sources of pollution. So 2 of those specifically that we've identified are Kilbury Sewage Treatment Works and the Bidwell Brook. And then finally, from the microbial source tracking data provided by Southwest Water, we've been able to deduce that there's significant amounts of human bacterial sources within the Dart, and this is alongside the agricultural, with the main agricultural contributor appearing to be cattle. Next slide. So I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about what we found at individual sites now. So in terms of spatial patterns, so our highest point up the river at Holme Weir has been very clean. The water quality up there is consistently consistently has low bacterial concentrations. There are spikes after rainfall events, but these seem to die down quite quickly. But then as you move down to Dartington, so Dartington Beach, bacterial concentrations are actually have been quite high, quite consistently. And then they've been a little bit lower down at Dartington Pontoon before really spiking at Steamer Quay, which is probably the most polluted out of all of the sites that we've been monitoring. However, then as you move down into the estuary, the water quality quite rapidly increases. No, yeah, increases with bacterial concentrations decreasing. So Stoke Gabriel, Diddersham, and Wharfleet again have much lower concentrations of bacteria and are much more in line with what you find at Holme Weir in terms of clean water quality. Next slide. So another thing that's been really interesting is seasonal differences in water quality at a lot of these sites. So in the Upper Dart, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of variations in water quality. So if you look at the table, you have the classifications and how these are calculated using a statistical method and is the same method that the Environment Agency uses. And basically you get the numeric score assigns whether it's water quality is excellent, good, sufficient, or poor. So in our upstream sites, you can see that actually the water quality year round has been the same. There's not been a huge amount of difference. However, in the estuary, it's a very different picture. So down at Steamer Quay, the water qualities remain poor year round. However, Stoke Gabriel, it was sufficient, but over the winter, largely as a result of rainfall and sewage spills, it would actually be classified as poor if we were taking in year-round data. And this is the same at Diddersham and Wharfleet Creek. But the spikes in water quality at these bacterial concentrations at these sites very much linked to rainfall events and sewage spills. And that is the reason why year round, that's why reason why we're seeing such different seasonal variations in water quality at these sites. However, I feel it's important that this information is available and transparent because the reality is people are using the river year round. It doesn't just stop in September and start up again in May. There's always people in the river. When I'm out sampling, people are always in. So we need to be able to inform people on this. Next slide. So coming back to pollution at Dartington, really, we were getting really high levels of bacteria concentrations at Dartington, and this didn't really seem to make sense to us because it didn't correlate with rainfall. It didn't really correlate with sewage spills. And there was no obvious sources within the area that we could spot that could be causing this. So we started to look and think about what might be causing this levels of pollution at the site. And we looked on the river and realised that Kilbury Sewage Treatment Works, that serves Buckfastleigh with a population of about 3,000 people, releases its treated effluent straight into the Dart. But unlike Totnes Sewage Treatment Works, for example, it does not have final treatment or tertiary treatment, which is at Totnes, this is UV treatment. So the final effluent from the sewage works goes through UV light, and this pretty much reduces the bacterial load to zero. However, Kilbury does not have this final treatment. So we were wondering if it was Kilbury Sewage Treatment Works was responsible for the levels of pollution we were seeing. So what we went and did is we went and investigated this by testing above and below the sewage treatment works, which alarmingly revealed quite high levels of bacteria coming out of the treated effluent. So we then tested at multiple sites downstream between Kilbury and Dartington to basically trace the bacteria from its source all the way down, and we basically tracked it the whole way down the river, all the way to Dartington from Kilbury. So it was quite alarming to find that this was the case. However, we have had commitments from South West Water that Kilbury will be getting UV treatment by 2027. So if this happens and goes ahead, it would be a very positive step towards improving water quality within the Dart. So I'm now going to hand over to Rob, my colleague, to talk about what's coming next.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kit. Let's jump on to the next slide, please, Nick. So I think what you can see from Kit's presentation there is that we've done probably one of the most in-depth studies of any river in the UK. And I think that's yielded a lot of results in terms of understanding where generally the pollution is most concentrated. But I think what we're seeing now is it's time to kind of revise our testing as we come into 2025 and focus more in identifying specific problems, as we've been able to do with Kilbury, but Kilbury isn't the end of it. There are other problems. So what are we going to do differently? So we're definitely going to continue the same monitoring. So all the sites that Kit has just taken you through, we're going to continue monitoring those sites, but we're not going to monitor them as frequently. We have been monitoring them every week. We're going to change that to roughly every month because we don't feel we're seeing enough variation week on week to really warrant that expense in terms of what it actually costs. We're also going to change how we monitor. So we've been looking very much at alternative ways of assessing what is the bacterial load in a water sample. And as Kit introduced at the beginning, we've been using certified labs because we wanted to have the credibility to our data. And I think that's been fantastic, and it's really ensured that this data has been taken seriously. But there are cheaper methods that we found. So we are now going to start switching to a cheaper method. We have already validated that method, so we're confident that the type of responses we get, the type of sample results we get, are broadly in line with what we're getting from the lab. So I think that gives us the confidence that we can switch to this method. We can save quite a bit of money, which enables us to stretch our limited budget a lot further. We will continue to run some of the samples through the lab periodically, just to kind of continue that validation. So that's going to allow us to stretch our limited budget a lot further. So what are we going to do? We're going to now start focusing on the tributaries within the Dart catchment so that we can really start to sort of look in more depth at where is this pollution coming from? Are there certain rivers or leaks that are coming in that are kind of, really a problem source? And if there are, how can we begin to identify within those where the problem is coming from? We're also going to be collaborating quite intensively with the Environment Agency, who have launched a special investigation, and will be testing around many of the areas where we're testing. So we're going to coordinate our testing very closely with them to ensure that we complement what they're doing. And obviously, as Kit's already said, we're going to continue that testing year round, whereas they're only going to do it during the bathing season. And we're really excited to announce a new project with the University of Plymouth that we'll talk more about, that's going to do very in-depth testing on Bidwell Brook and is really going to kind of shine a detailed light on Bidwell Brook. Let's move on, please, Nick. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned there, so the Environment Agency has launched an investigation that will start, I believe, in May. They will be focusing that around the problems at Steamer Quay and Stoke Gabriel, driven by the kind of unsatisfactory results that we've highlighted already. But they're also going to be looking at the Hems, Bidwell Brook, Malt Mill Lake, and upstream of Mill Pond. So we will also be looking at those same areas, but we're going to probably add some additional tributaries onto that. So these are some of the additional places that we'll be starting to look at. Next slide, please, Nick. So I touched upon earlier this new project with Plymouth. I think we're really excited to kind of introduce this to you, and we actually have a colleague from Plymouth joining us on this call, so available to kind of answer questions. Um, it's a big, complex study. I think the key information really to highlight is it's going to be incredibly in-depth look at the pollution on in Bidwell Brook. It's going to be looking in far more detail, far more frequently than we can afford to test. And it's going to be using that to try and understand, is it possible to move from bacterial testing, which is expensive and slow to process results, to faster forms of testing, which could correlate and serve as a proxy for high levels of bacteria, but do so much more quickly. And they're going to be looking at bringing AI into this, and the vision, and we'll have to see whether they get there with this project or there's a follow-on. The vision is to try and actually create some sort of early warning system so that there could be sensors in place within Bidwell Brook that would then trigger an alert to say, certain conditions have been have come about, that suggest that actually levels of bacteria have spiked. And similarly, perhaps an alert might come later to see, that actually they've now diminished. So I think this is really moving us in a very exciting direction, which is, I think what many people are looking for, which is it possible to have a kind of a near real-time warning that actually it's not really a good idea to use the river at this point in time, or if you do so with much greater caution than you normally would. So, this is very early days, but I think an exciting, groundbreaking project, and kind of really taking us in the direction of that. Next slide, please, Nick. Okay, so just to kind of finish off here, so I think the dart is now, I think in large part to kind of the work that you've all been doing in supporting this. Probably one of the most monitored rivers in the country. There are, across our work and the work of other partners that we're collaborating with, 66 different sites being monitored and over 1,000 samples planned to be collected this year. So I think, where we are now is great, but I think where we're going to be perhaps in 6 months' time is going to be very interesting in terms of really having a detailed insight in terms of what the specific sources of pollution are. And as with the Kilbury example, if we can actually tackle some of these sources, we should see a marked improvement in the quality of water. And I think the campaigning side, which is what we'll be moving on to, and we'll talk more about that on our next call, is an area we want to go. And I think one of the key things that we see is the real need to hold South West Water accountable in terms of what they are going to use our money to invest in to actually remedy their part of this problem. And I think we recognize, obviously, that they're not the only contributor to this problem, but I think they are one of the main contributors. So I think we really need to kind of make sure that commitments like Kit mentioned to put UV or some other treatment in place at Kilbury are actually formally made on the record, and we can hold them accountable in terms of when they say that will be completed by. So at this point, I'd like to stop. We'll hand over to you. We'd love to hear your questions, and we'll do our best to respond. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Richard Tornay. I'm a reporter with South Hams Newspapers. Good evening. I'd just like to ask very quickly whether I came in a bit late, whether the Environment Agency is launching this investigation in response to your findings. And also, have you handed your test results to South West Water? Because I covered your initial press release on the findings, and they wouldn't comment saying that they hadn't seen your report. So I just wanted to know whether you're aware of this, or whether perhaps they got their wires crossed and they have seen it and they have made a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I mean, I can respond briefly, and then Hannah, Kit, if you want to come in. My understanding is that the Environment Agency have launched this investigation off the back of their own testing. We do collaborate closely with them, so I think they are aware of the data that we have collected, and we've certainly shared it with them. But I think they are very much kind of, about collecting their own data and forming their own opinions based on that. So that would be my expectation. Kit can probably comment more on that. I'm certainly surprised to hear that comment from Southwest Water, and I think we have shared our data with them repeatedly. Our data is public. Kit, perhaps you can post a link in the chat later on to the raw data set. It's out there on the internet for anyone to see, with all the raw test results and even the links to the lab certificates with the test data. So yeah, there's absolutely no justification for them to claim that they haven't seen it. But Kit or Hannah, with you, if you'd like to add anything further to that.
In terms
Just,
of,
oh, go ahead, Kit.
I was just going to say, in terms of the Environment Agency, they've definitely, so the team that are looking at the bathing waters on the Dart have definitely seen all our data and have used it to inform how they're going to investigate over the sort of coming year. And we're basically collaborating with them, and we're going to continue to share this data with them and work together to solve the problems.
Just to add to that, in terms of the formal investigations, the government is required to bring a bathing site up to sufficient level. So what's happened is our getting bathing status at Steamer Quay and a poor result has triggered an investigation, a formal investigation, which involves a report being made by Southwest Water and the EA having a very thorough look at all of the pollutants affecting that site. And that is due to begin in April. They're in the information gathering phase at the moment. And thank you, Richard, for your article this morning in the Totnes Times. Great to see you here.
Thank you.
Nick, do you want to call on people in terms of who you want to come in? We've got a few hands up, but maybe you can coordinate who to take.
Yeah, there's a hand up by Anne-Marie Mayer.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to ask about, testing the enterococci and the E. coli. Is that very specific to sewage, or what about all the livestock pollution? Could it be picking up some of that, or how can you tell if it's the livestock that's polluting the river?
So E. coli and enterococci could basically be from livestock or from human sewage. And that's sort of why. So I mentioned at the start briefly the microbial source tracking. So that's the main way that there is to differentiate between what the source of that bacteria is. But then there's a lot of other data, such as Southwest Water now publish all of their sewage spill data. So if you're seeing a spike in E. coli or enterococci at a site close to a CSO, it's very likely that this spike in bacterial levels will be as a result of that spill. So there's other data available around gives you access to determine where the source is coming from. But yeah, just an E. coli reading or an enterococci reading, we couldn't exactly tell between the two.
Do I have a hand up with Jay McKay?
Thank you. Yes, right at the beginning, Kit, I think it was saying that you did the Freedom of Information request to get data from Southwest Water. I'd just be interested to know how you found that data correlated with your own findings, and what was the extent of that data relative to what you're doing?
So in terms of the bacterial data that we got, it basically at the sites that we've been monitoring, the findings were pretty much the same. The high concentrations are in the same place, the low concentrations in the same place. But they'd done quite an extent. I think it's their enhanced bathing water monitoring program or something. But they did have a lot of samples in other tributaries, so the Hems, for example, the Ashburn, the Mardle. So they've got wider sampling, and we've basically that data was kind of informed us on where we're starting to target our investigations. So they've got a very widespread data set, but yeah, and there was so it's been very useful to sort of not only confirm our findings but also allow us to plan where we want to investigate further.
Okay, thank you. But I mean, the corollary of that is that they were clearly aware of the problems. Your data helps to confirm that and certainly to light a fire under them, but nonetheless, they can't claim not to have realized that there was a problem in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, they've clearly been aware of it. But then in the other thing is their data set, there's certain areas of it that seem slightly, I call it sloppy, with sites not being clearly labeled as certain places and stuff like that. And some of the sites where they're saying there's not a problem. So I know the monitoring they did at Rattery sewage treatment works, they weren't actually monitoring where the effluent from Rattery sewage treatment works enters the bidwell. So our data is also actually sort of pointed to errors in their data set as well and sort of shown up where things,
Yeah, shortcomings.
shortcomings.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Another hand up, Timothy.
Thank you. Yes, just a slightly broader question, I guess, for groups that are looking to do similar work as yourselves, looking back over the approach you've taken to the monitoring and the sampling regime, and that's obviously changing now. Is there anything that you would perhaps do differently from the outset, or in terms of frequency or number of sites or sort of general approach?
So yeah, I think in terms of, I know there was the phase 1 testing. I know there was it was all very new. I know there was a couple of issues in terms of communication with the lab and samples. I think that's something that's, if you're sort of looking at setting up this sort of thing, it's making sure that you get advice on, because the samples were saturating at 1,000 CFU and the lab wasn't running later dilution. So I know that was sort of an issue early on, but that got resolved. But in terms of what we've done, I think in terms of the sites we've chosen, it's worked really nicely and it's allowed us to guided us into where we've got to. And I guess it really is just down to budget and how much you can afford, because the samples are quite expensive, about £30 each or so.
Maybe just to add to that, Kit, I mean, I think, Timothy, there's also, you know, as we've seen with the FOI or environmental information regulation request, you know, we were able to access quite a wealth of data from South West Water. You know, we actually have been in dialogue with them for quite some time, where they've promised us access to that data verbally, and we'd hope that they would voluntarily share it with us. But I think, you know, in retrospect, probably just making that request much earlier would have been sensible, because obviously that would have guided us as well in terms of where to look in more depth. The Environment Agency does testing. All of their data is publicly available. You can look it up on their website. So that's another good source. And then I think, you know, just reaching out to local universities and other academic institutions, you know, our partnership with Plymouth has been fantastic. And I think that, you know, they obviously there may have been data that they had collected earlier. It turns out there wasn't, but it has actually led to this interesting research project. So I think that's another area to kind of think about, is, you know, really starting by sort of cataloging what data is out there. Just to kind of also shout out in terms of the Rivers Trust, you know, they do a lot of testing as well. Tends to be not so much bacterial testing, but, you know, again, good to reach out to them.
Brilliant, thank you.
I think it's Stuart next, then on to John. So Stuart, if you...
Is it me that you were expecting to hear from?
Yes.
Good. This is Stuart from the Friends of the River team. Just wanted to say thank you very much to Kit and Robert for all the help that they've provided with our own testing. It's very interesting to see the deterioration in the winter, and that's something that we have noticed, where we've got what is in the summer excellent bathing water. If you look at it across the year, it's going to be poor. in all probability once we've completed a few more results. And I think there are some real issues surrounding the proposal to extend the bathing season. And it'd be very interesting to see how the Environment Agency actually manages their way through that process. And I think that there is a case for having two sets of results, effectively, like a summer testing regime and a winter testing regime. And that may be something that, you know, as rivers groups, that we have to actually look at.
Thank you, Stuart. It's really helpful to hear that feedback and have it affirmed by a different river group.
And always a pleasure to work with you, Stuart. So please do reach out to us wherever there's anything we can help you with.
Yep, thank you very much.
John, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I realize you've got both budget constraints and you've got to focus on the bathing sites. I just wonder if at some point farther down the line, you might consider testing farther up on the Dart, say on the west and the east branches, where there's an awful lot of activity up there, and it's sometimes a little bit, it's deceiving because you think everything's pristine, and then you realize stuff coming out of, say, Morton Hampstead or stuff coming out of Princetown might be having a real negative effect. And I just wonder if that's in the cards. I realize you got a lot on the plate. I'm not pressured.
I think that's a great prompt, John, and I think we definitely haven't ruled that out. Sorry, Hannah, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to pitch in there and say that we're aware of the recent updates to Princetown having documented quite high spills there. There's then been some remedial work, but yeah, it's an area that we could definitely look at more closely.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's sort of logistical challenges for us in testing, and I think this is something we can discuss with Kit. He's been doing this sampling for us, and obviously the more ground he has to cover, the longer it takes. But I think, you know, us moving to petrifilm as the new testing approach actually perhaps opens some doors there. And I think one possibility that we can begin to explore is, can we establish links with local volunteers that are willing to take the samples, and then we would somehow receive those samples and process them. So I think that opens up an interesting opportunity, because I think, you know, now for us with this new method, the cost of us processing those samples and publishing the results and analyzing the results is much lower. It's actually the logistical challenges of collecting the samples. So, you know, perhaps that's something that we could follow up with you on. If you have links into the community on Dartmoor, perhaps you could help us in terms of, you know, how we would build relationships with people that might be open to doing that. That's certainly something that we can explore.
The irony is that there is probably a greater volunteer effort on the 10 than there is on the farther reaches of the Dart. There's actually no formal body on when you get up on the Dart, and there are 2 or 3 formal bodies on the 10, where I probably spend as much time up there as I do on the Dart. So thank you for the answer.
Can I just add something there, that we're in close contact with the Duchy, who do a lot of comprehensive testing up there. So that's also informing our choices.
Dave Hawkes, you have a hand up?
Hi, hello. I hope you can hear me. So that was great. I really enjoyed the presentation, and well done to everybody. There's lots of hard work I know went into that, and the investigative stuff around Kilbury Brook was really interesting. So a quick question about petrifilm. How quickly do you get the readout from that? Do you have to leave them to mature? Is it for 24 hours and then record, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's 24. It's exactly what you did on the project with Surface Against Sewage. So it's exactly that. So 24 hours incubate, you get your results. So that's another advantage. We get our data back much quicker than the lab, which is
Right.
currently about 3 or 4 days turnaround.
Yeah, but it's sort of a follow-up question. So related to heavy rainfall or Southwest Water opening outlets when they shouldn't. Have you got any information from the testing that you've done and what the time delay is between, say, a heavy rainfall and when the bacteria goes up at various different sites? Is that possible to get from the data you've acquired so far?
I think we could definitely get an indication of it. I think the challenge here is, and this is one of the challenges with the approach we've taken, is one sample is just not very representative of the overall picture. So things like the exact time it would take. So definitely we've got samples that show when spills are happening or when there's a lot of runoff. Pollution is definitely higher, but couldn't give an exact time delay as such at the moment. But as far as I'm aware, it's pretty much instantaneous, the increase.
Yeah. I've got another follow-up question on a completely different topic, but I can wait for other people to get their oar in if they wish.
Well, if I just respond briefly to your first question, Dave, I don't think anyone else has got their hand up yet, so you're welcome to carry on. So I think what you're getting at is exactly what the Plymouth project is going to be doing. So in some circumstances, they'll be sampling hourly. They're going to be deliberately sampling immediately after heavy rainfall events. So I think we are going to get a data set later this year for Bidwell Brook that does really talk to that area specifically. But as Kit said, you've really got to sort of be really geared up to take a lot of samples very quickly, to actually catch that. So it's not something we've been able to do. But anyway, over to you in terms of your next question.
Okay, so on a different topic, it's the project where I helped get the samples last summer, and fascinating to see the results from it's York University, wasn't it, that did that, where various pollutants that shouldn't be in the river were there, but all at levels, if I remember rightly, which were below, I think, fairly arbitrary thresholds of where they may be harmful to life, to health. It would be interesting to know in a pristine river environment, if such a thing exists, how it compares. I mean, is there any way of getting that sort of control data? For example, I don't know, a remote part of Scotland or something like that, because presumably some of these things will always be present. It's just part of the natural environment. And it'd just be nice to know that information
So
be able to compare.
as part of that same project, there was, I think it was about 40 odd other community groups and sites all around the country being where the exact same amount of samples were taken, the exact same amount of the exact same parameters were analysed for. And I think part of the work coming out of this project from the University of York is looking at sort of the differences in levels between all these sites. So the data is very much there from this project. It's just in the pipeline of getting processed and looked into and published.
It'd be great to see that when it is published.
No, I'll make sure to pass it on to you as soon as I hear anything come out about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Have we got any other questions? I can't see anyone else with a hand up.
There's no more hands up at the moment.
Any more questions before we move on? Okay, let's go with the next slide then, Nick. So this is it's an opportunity to get involved and be a part of this movement. We're welcoming donations. Some people have approached us and asked us if they can make a monthly contribution. £1 a month even makes a huge amount of difference. If you'd like to contribute, this link will take you through to being able to do that. And just highlighting that we've had an incredible amount of support from our community. That's, people coming together is what has enabled this to happen. And we feel that, positive long-term change for the health of our river can really happen in an effective way when we're collaborating. We're very grateful for the people that have supported us. The next slide. And so, Nikki, do you want to say a little bit about our fabulous event that's coming up?
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to Kit and Rob as well. We have coming up a volunteer and community celebration of all that we've achieved so far, and an opportunity to, let our hair down and celebrate together. There'll be an opportunity for us to raise some funds as well through an auction and the tickets. So it's a wonderful meal that's being put on by the Green Table in Dartington. And then they're dimming the lights, and we've got a brilliant DJ who loves the dart himself, has spent many years growing up on the dart and was absolutely keen to support our event. And so it's an opportunity for us to round up all that we've done up until now in a celebratory fashion, just to say we have an amazing river, we have an amazing community, and here's an opportunity for us all to get together and toast all that we've achieved, and let our hair down a little bit together. So please, scan the QR code that's here and book your tickets. That they are going. So there's a finite number. And we really want to just say thank you. Thank you to the community. Thank you to the team. Thank you to our volunteers. Tonight, particularly, we've got Nick, who's been helping on the comms and running this workshop for us. We've got amazing Kate, who are in the background doing our comms and marketing and social media alongside Nick. And, thank you, everyone. We wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without your support and commitment. So thank you from, Hannah, Kit, Rob, and myself.
Thanks, Nikki.
Yes.
Can you do the next slide, Nick? So just want to highlight that this is the beginning of a series of these Water Hub events, and we are really open to hearing from you. We'd like to hear from you about what would be helpful. What would you like to hear about? What would you like to discuss? So we've got our next event, June the 12th at 6 o'clock. If you're not on our mailing list, then do click on the website and register so that you get all of our newsletters and up-to-date information. We won't inundate you. We'll just send things that will be of interest. And we've got all of our contacts here. So if you want to get in touch with any of us, so we've got Kit, who's our water technician, and myself, Nikki, and Rob, who are directors. And we'd love to hear from you. And we're really grateful that you've all joined us this evening. Thank you so much.